So, what are your thoughts on S-532, the Stop Arming Terrorists Act?
I got to tell you, in all honesty, I'm a very strong person in terms of my beliefs that we have totally in the way we look at foreign policy and the way we look at terrorism, we have gone in the exact opposite direction that we need to go. We are looking at terrorists as being what we see from Al Qaeda first, and then obviously from ISIS, and we see these groups. And we see what they do in the Middle East. We see what they do even in Europe. And on occasion, what they do in the United States. But terrorism is not something that is an ISIS or Al-Qaeda only related issue. Terrorism in this country, the vast majority of terrorism in this country, has been committed by white supremacists. The vast majority. We talk about terrorism, and we always want to talk about immediately what the Republicans have done and some Democrats have done has immediately make the association with ISIS. The association ought to be with the Dylan Roos of this world. It ought to be with the Timothy McVeighs of this world. It ought to be with the gentleman Nicholas Cruz, who we already know from yesterday is a white supremacist. Until we start realizing that these are the people that we need to stop arming and make sure that they can't go forward. This is what we're going to have to do to stop actual terrorist events in this country, or at least lessen them dramatically. You're always going to have Al-Qaeda, you're always going to have ISIS, because you're going to have in the Middle East groups that they just cannot, people who cannot survive because there's no employment, they're starving, in many cases there's no water. That in itself is going to result in people uprising and people going against the establishment, and eventually they're going to become angry enough to become armed. You're always going to have that.
So are you against the overinflated military budgets? That was a follow-up question somebody had.
Oh my gosh. I do about a 15-minute rant on the Defense Department, because it's one of the main issues I have with Senator Feinstein. She keeps voting for budget increases by the Defense Department. The Defense Department budget needs to be cut, period, end of story. It needs to be cut dramatically. What we have done in this country is we have screwed up our priorities, where we actually think that we're protecting our public by continuing to give the Defense Department bombers they won't use. There's a study that showed by the Defense Department in its own audit, they wasted $125 billion over 5 years in administrative costs, not weapons, not wars, in administrative costs. We keep pumping money into this Defense Department. In the meantime, we are cutting money for medical technology, for medical advances that could cure diseases like Alzheimer's, help with things like diabetes. These are the things that are killing our people. It's not foreign countries that are killing us. It's things like diseases. It's things like our quality of life is being cut back on. Our education budgets are being cut back on. These things are being cut back on because we have to feed the Defense Department. It needs to stop. Winston Churchill has a very famous quote from World War II, which I use frequently, which I always loved. When his Defense Department minister came to him during World War II and said, we've got to raise funds for the war. We've come up with a plan to cut education. We've come up with a plan to cut the arts, and we can cut back on healthcare. And Winston Churchill famously said, well, exactly what are we fighting for then? That's what we have to sort of look at in this country. If we're going to continue just to pour money in the Defense Department and watch while our quality of life decreases, our healthcare decreases, our environment decreases, what exactly are we putting money in there for? What are we fighting for? I am a huge proponent of cutting the Defense Department budget, and I make that a centerpiece of this campaign.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. That was a clip from Get Your News On with Ron, the world's first viewer-curated streaming news show. What does that mean? That means I log on to a stream and people tweet me articles over on Twitter at Ron Placone, or they use our Reddit subsection, which is just Get Your News On with Ron over on Reddit. And that's how we build the show. I'm seeing all these articles for the first time. We are literally getting our news on together. Follow me on Twitter at Ron Placone so you can participate. And this show streams live every Tuesday through Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So please do tune in. If you want to support this show, you can do so over on patreon.com/Ron Placone, where for as low as $1 a month, You get access to exclusive podcasts every week, exclusive videos, free tickets to shows when I'm performing in your town, and more for as low as $1 a month. Please do consider it. Thank you so much for your support. This has been Get Your News On with Ron.